Good afternoon, members of the media, wider listening and viewing public of Trinidad and Tobago. Welcome to this week's post-cabinet press conference. I have with me the Honourable Minister of Finance, Minister Imbert, and the Honourable Minister of Works and Transport, Senator Rohan Sinanan. I'll ask Mr. Sinanan to lead us off this afternoon.
Welcome to members of the media. Okay, my task this afternoon is to inform the national community of the two decisions taken today at the Cabinet, where the Solomon Holtroy Highway extension, 4 additional packages have been approved to go out for tender. This will bring us to the 7 packages, and additional 5 packages will be offered on tender within the next month, which will bring the segment of the road from the start at the Gulf City Mall all the way down to the Point Fortin at the Dunlop roundabout. We estimate that time to be about 2 years to have that section of the road completed, and we just wanted to put on the table that the rumor that the highway have not restarted is simply just that. It's just a rumor. Cabinet also today approved the upgrade of the Moruga Road Rehabilitation Project, which is a project that includes 22 landslips, 22 culvert crossing, 4 new bridges, and the repaving of the entire road where required. So that, again, is another major project that will be started very shortly, and we look forward for the local content in these both projects. Both projects have been packaged in such a way that local contractors are able to take full advantage of the opportunities. I thank you.
Just to add to what Minister Sinanan told us a short while ago, it's also an important point to note that in the continuation of the highway from, as he said, Gulf City all the way down to Point Fortin, and those packages, the government will be utilising the money that it recovered from the standby letters of credit in the litigation with OAS, that, as you all would recall, was successful all the way up in the courts of London, and that's how we managed to recover that money. So at this time, it's come in very, very useful, and that is the money that we'll be utilising to complete the highway to Point Fortin for as far as possible. Minister Imbert.
2 matters I'd like to report on. 1, Cabinet today approved the terms of a policy loan from the Andean Development Bank, also known as the CAF or CAF, in the amount of $300 million to assist the government with its policy initiatives. We expect to get this money in 2 installments, $150 million within the next month or so, and then another $150 million about a month after that. And secondly, you will have seen in the newspapers that action has been taken with respect to CL Financial, and I will deal with questions in a while, but I want to correct a misleading headline in the Express, which says that the government sought or is seeking to wind up CLECO. That is inaccurate. CLECO, which is Colonial Life Insurance Company, is under the control and management of the central bank and has been under the control and management of the central bank for many, many years. So that there's no action on the part, was no action on the part of the government to wind up CLECO. What the government has sought to do is to approach the court to appoint provisional liquidators with respect to CL Financial, which is the parent company, the holding company that has shares in Colonial Life, in a number of other companies, Angostura, Home Construction, CL World Brands, and so on. So there's no action being taken against CLECO. So CLECO policyholders and so on should be assured that the management of CLECO remains under the control of the central bank. I just wanted to make that clarity. There is a big difference between CLECO and CL Financial.
Okay, any questions? Yes?
Where is Republic Bank in all of that? I'm not sure where it falls.
A number of shares of Republic Bank were pledged to the CLICO Investment Fund, which is a publicly traded equity or security that trades on the Trinidad and Tobago Stock Exchange. So when the CLICO Investment Fund was created and units or shares were issued to policyholders in exchange for some of their policies, the security or the securitization for the CLICO Investment Fund involved a significant block of Republic Bank shares. In addition to that block of Republic Bank shares, which is being used to back the CLICO Investment Fund units, Colonial Life itself also has laid claim to ownership of about 7% of Republic Bank, and CLICO Investment Bank has laid claim to about 18% of Republic Bank. The two together make up about 25% of Republic Bank shares. So there's 25% Republic Bank shares owned in aggregate between Colonial Life and CLICO Investment Bank, and then there's a significant quantity of shares in this CLICO Investment Fund. I believe when you add it all up, it's about 52-53%. So you have about 39, is my maths right, or 29% in CLICO Investment Fund backing those units, and another 25% owned in aggregate between CLICO Investment Bank and Colonial Life. I don't know if that answers your question.
That isn't affected in any way by oil.
Well, as I pointed out, Colonial Life is under the control and management of the central bank. CLICO Investment Bank is under liquidation. It's in liquidation. The liquidator is the Deposit Insurance Corporation, so that the 18% approximately that has claimed, I'm using the word claim very deliberately, claimed by CLICO Investment Bank is under the control of the Deposit Insurance Corporation, because they are the liquidator of CLICO Investment Bank. And the 7%, more or less, that is owned by Colonial Life is under the control and management of the central bank. So none of those two shareholdings, the 7% claimed by Colonial Life and the 18% claimed by CLICO Investment Bank, is affected by this action. Those are separate matters, and as I said, CIB is being liquidated by the Deposit Insurance Corporation, and Colonial Life is under the control of the central bank. This action treats with CL Financial, which has shares. It has shares in Angostura, in home construction, in CL World Brands, etc., etc. Okay?
We also would like to take this opportunity to make the point that government took this action after very careful deliberation and on the basis of very clear legal advice in order to protect the taxpayers of Trinidad and Tobago. And Minister Imbert will give a little bit of background as to what it was taking place with respect to other shareholders of CLF, and why government thought it was necessary at this stage to take this position to protect the amount of money that has been injected into CLF and other subsidiaries and related companies since 2009 to protect the taxpayers of Trinidad and Tobago and the public of Trinidad and Tobago.
Well, as you know, there's been some speculation and difference of opinion on how much of taxpayers' money was injected into the CLICO CL Financial bailout. As I indicated at a press conference, it's more than a year ago in this room, it was in excess of $20 billion. I think I had said 23 or 24 at the time. In the petition before the court, the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Finance, who has put in one of the principal affidavits in support of the petition, has indicated and given a breakdown, and the breakdown is actually in the express, that so far at least $23 billion has been injected. But in addition to that, there are other liabilities that face the government for having become involved in this matter. There's exposure to claims from third parties with respect to deposits they may have had in Clico Investment Bank, and other exposure to the myriad of companies that CL Financial was associated with. The government, once it got involved, became liable and became exposed to other claims. So the 23 billion is a sort of a base figure, and there is more. It is anticipated there would be more, but these have not been quantified at this point in time. What was happening was that this Clico resolution plan, or this CL Financial bailout, was supposed to have been done in 3 years. It all started in 2009, and it should have been completed, and the assets of CL Financial and Colonial Life should have been disposed of by 2012 in order to repay the government. Well, that didn't happen. So what happened instead is the original agreement was extended for short periods. It was extended 16 times or 17 times. When we came in, we found that the agreement was about to expire. So we got an extension from the other shareholders of CL Financial, because the government actually owns 14% of CL Financial by way of a bailout of British American insurance company BICO. Government took over a liability of BICO, which is a Eastern Caribbean operating or Caribbean company, and in return got access to 14% more or less of CL Financial. But what has happened is that as we were going along with this resolution, which was very slow, because the only money really recovered so far was really out of a forced situation, and that is the methanol holdings, the MHTL situation, where the matter went to arbitration, and the arbitrator ordered the government to sell the shares in MHTL to the other shareholder, a foreign company. And approximately $7 billion, $7.5 billion came out of that. But if that was not forced, we may have recovered even less. So the recovery at this point in time, after 8 years, has only been about $7.5 billion. And the government has put in at least 23. So that it was going very, very slowly. And then there was reluctance on the part of the other shareholders to continue with the original agreement and to sign another extension of the shareholders' agreement. I took a note to Cabinet to get the government's approval for the government to sign another extension to August of this year, actually. And we sent that to the other shareholders, and they didn't sign it. They sent it back. So we found ourselves in a situation where there was no shareholders' agreement, but we still maintained a majority on the board, because the original agreement gave 4 directors to the government. This is CL Financial. I want to make that very crystal clear. The original agreement gave 4 government directors on the board of CL Financial and 3 to an entity called United Shareholders Limited, which purported to represent all of the other shareholders, the original owners of CL Financial. So we had a situation where there were 4 government directors, 3 non-government directors. So the government had majority control of the board. But then, not too long ago, the other side, the United Shareholders side, asked for a special meeting of shareholders to add 2 of their people to the board, which would bring their membership up to 5 and make the government 4, effectively causing the government to lose control of the board and control of the companies. And we couldn't sit idly by, because, as I said, this thing been going on for 8 years, 23+ billion of taxpayers' money put into this attempt at a solution, and just dragging on. And then the other side makes a move, which they are allowed to under law, under the Companies Act, once 5% of the shareholders of a company request a special shareholders meeting, it's mandatory. It's just certain procedural matters that have to be followed in terms of the format of the notice and that sort of thing. So eventually, all the directors of CL Financial were requisitioned and served with a request so that there was no way out. A special meeting of shareholders has been scheduled now for the 26th of July. And, being the custodian of public money, and so much of the public's money has gone into this arrangement, we felt as government we had no choice but to seek to protect the public purse, protect taxpayers' funds, and to make this application for the CL Financial to be put into liquidation.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Well, for Minister Sutherland, what's happening now with regard to this ferry is a he say, she say versus Mr. Basant and Ms. Lewis of the Port Authority. I'm just wondering if there's any information, concrete evidence that can come forward to say definitively where the vessel is at this time, its scheduled arrival, and whether or not there were any maintenance issues on the way to Trinidad.
Okay, let me start by saying I don't know about the he say, she say, because I don't know who I saw an article by Mark Basant, and I saw a press release coming from the Port Authority. Mark Basant was making some claims that he spoke to one Miss Lewis at the port. The port put out a statement from Miss Alison Lewis. I think Mark Basant needs to check to see there are two Lewis at the port. And I don't know if Mark is aware of that.
Well, he said he attempted to reach and got no response.
It's to Miss Lewis.
He hasn't spoken.
But I just want to put on the record there are two Miss Lewis at the port. So I wouldn't get into the he say, she say. I just want to say that we have a board at the Port Authority headed by Miss Alison Lewis, who I have full confidence in. And I know she's someone who is thorough before she takes a decision. So I am putting my faith that Ms. Lewis and the board would have done the right thing. My information is that we have two vessels en route to Trinidad and Tobago. One will be here on Sunday, which will take care of the cargo aspect of it. And sometime later on this month, we have a ferry vessel that is expected to arrive on the island.
What was the original day that the ferry was supposed to arrive?
I think it is on the 17th of this month. So yes, there was a delay. But I must say the agreement with the charter party is that if there's a delay outside of the time allotted, there will be penalties. So I'm sure the board, on the advice of the attorneys, would have taken that into consideration, that if there's a delay outside a specific period, the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago would be compensated.
Are you aware of what penalties maybe?
No, I can't give you that information now.
Any other questions? Kamal?
There was an issue raised whether TerraJet was higher in cost than the Ocean Flower 2. Is there any way that we could just lay that information out on the table and show what the bid was for the TerraJet versus the bid for the Ocean Flower 2 so we can see for ourselves?
Yeah. I have no objections to that. And I think very soon the port, I guess if Mark Basant or any journalist was to probably address the right Lewis on the port and make that request, it will be fulfilled.
Kamal?
A question to Minister Imbert. This week we would have reported on the issue of the net official reserves. I think the level is the lowest since February of 2010. I know you responded to a reporter, but I think some economists are questioning if there is a plan to sort of mitigate the impact of that, and how do we deal with it?
Well, at this point, as I mentioned to the CNC3 financial reporter, there is no cause for concern. We have over 9 months of import cover. And this CAF loan, for example, will inject $300 million immediately into our reserves. Whenever the government borrows, for example, when we borrowed the $1 billion last year, that immediately goes into the country's reserves, so that there is no cause for concern. The international benchmark for reserves is 6 months, and we're well over 9 months. The point I need to make is that it's a balancing act. The inflow of US dollars into the country is driven primarily by receipts from the oil and gas sector. So that if you go back 3 years, you will see that the inflows of US dollars on an annual basis were of the region of $3 billion from the oil and gas sector. It's now maybe 10% of that. So we've lost an inflow of approximately 2.6 billion US dollars on an annual basis. Now, what the government does with the reserves is the demand for foreign exchange up to, I would say, a year ago, was in the vicinity of 7 billion US dollars per year. So that is the demand for foreign exchange in Trinidad and Tobago. And what the central bank would do from time to time would be to inject governments, US dollars belonging to the government, into the commercial banking sector. So let's take a typical year, 2016. Well, the demand would have been 7 billion. The amount produced by the private sector in terms of its exports and so on would have been 4.5 billion, so that the central bank would have taken $2.5 billion of our reserves and put that into the commercial banking sector to deal with the demand. So you have to balance. You can't expect the reserves to remain at $10 billion if your inflows have dropped by $2 billion a year. So we just carefully monitor it. We are getting some inflows from one-off sources, as I said, like the $1 billion roadshow loan that we got. We're getting this $300 million CAF loan. So we get inflows coming in. When we take money out of the Heritage and Stabilization Fund, for example, it's US dollars. So that we took 250 out recently. We took about 300 million last year. All of that goes into topping up the reserves. So as the reserves are topped up by inflows from various sources, they're drawn down to be put into the system. So if we are going to attempt to deal with the demand in some meaningful way, if we're going to make our best effort to ensure that there's a supply of US dollars available in the local system, we have to use our reserves. So we keep monitoring it, and the current level is quite satisfactory. The current level of reserves is quite satisfactory. It's way above the international benchmark. Barbados, for example, has about 1 month reserve. We have 9. Okay?
Yeah.
Well, another question I wanted to follow up on the cargo vessel that is expected to arrive on Sunday, you said?
Yeah.
How soon will it be integrated into the sea bridge in terms of carrying cargo to Tobago?
We expect within 2 to 3 days maximum, once everything goes well.
But what kind of time frame are you looking at for the liquidation of CLF assets to get to that?
I can't answer that because this matter is before a judge. It is up for the judge to look at the merits of the application and determine whether it is meritorious, and determine whether provisional liquidators should be appointed, and then everything will flow from that. The time frame and the mechanism and all of that will flow from that. So it's up to the judge to hear, in the first instance, to hear the various arguments of the parties and determine whether the government's application has merit.
Follow-up question. CLICO is now profitable. It's repaid government about $7 billion. How long will it remain under the central bank?
Where did you get that idea that CLICO is profitable?
This is a question coming.
No, but that's a statement you're making. I never said CLICO is profitable.
So it's not profitable.
No, the latest accounts that I have seen, CLICO is still insolvent by approximately $1 billion. That's the December 2016 accounts. December 2015 was the same, more or less, 1.1 billion, and the year before that, 950 million. So for the last 3 financial years, CLICO has remained insolvent. It is not profitable. And you should know as well that Colonial Life, because you shouldn't mix up the two, eh? Colonial Life has stopped writing new business quite some time ago. So Colonial Life income generating capacity is really quite limited because it's not writing new business.
It's going to stay under Central Bank for the foreseeable future.
No, if you look at the CLICO resolution plan that is in the court and also laid in the Parliament every quarter, as Minister of Finance, I have to lay the progress made with respect to the CLICO resolution plan every quarter. It is the intention that the assets of Colonial Life would be liquidated by the central bank to repay the government some of the money that the government has put into the CL Financial bailout and other creditors of Colonial Life.
My final question, there was an issue with Prof. Balgobin's legal fees being paid essentially by the state. Are you comfortable with that money?
I would prefer not to comment on that, and just to say that his fees were not paid for by the state.
Can you expand on that?
But they weren't.
So there was an article that stated otherwise. Can you?
I don't recall any article that said that those legal fees were paid for by the state. I don't recall that, and I've read all the articles.
So who paid the $3 million in fees?
I don't think it was the state, and I think I'm only qualified.
So you paid for by CLF?
No, I don't believe that either. I'm only qualified to speak on behalf of the state. I can't speak on behalf of other entities.
Okay, so you can't speak on behalf of CLF, is what you're saying?
That is for the board of directors to talk about.
Are you comfortable with them paying those fees, though?
I really wouldn't want to comment on that.
Any other questions? Any other issues?
Was Mr. Marlon Rouse firing linked to these tensions that exist? Marlon, not Rouse, Hola, sorry. Hola. Sorry. That's a journalist, sorry. Was his firing linked to the...
There was an article in the newspapers, I can't recall which paper, might have been yours, which gave some details with respect to that matter. And my recollection of the article is that it was a fairly accurate representation where reasons were given for that action that was taken by the board of CL Financial.
And tell me something, you suggest, well, there seems to be some contention between how much money the government has put in.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't there some sort of accounting when money was put in over the period so that there is a clear...
All right, I will step out of my crease now and say it is only when this government came into office that a proper accounting of the money spent by taxpayers to bail out CN Financial was done. I would say that prior to this government coming into office, the approach to that matter was less than perfect. We are the first government since 2010 who did a proper accounting exercise using qualified accounting personnel and the records at the Ministry of Finance, and that is how the permanent secretary in the Ministry of Finance was able to put in his affidavit the total sums expended by the government. There's been a lot of loose talk about this, and one of the good things that would come out of this application is this matter is now in the public domain. The public can see for themselves, based on the affidavit of the permanent secretary, exactly how much money was spent and on what. Because there has been, there are people who tell me on an almost weekly basis that they were told that the government only put $5 billion into the bailout, and they believe that. So one of the good things about this matter is that once and for all, it will be determined how much money the taxpayers actually put into this. And our records show it's $23 billion and counting, plus. Okay? And it doesn't, our application does not put a figure on legal fees and consultants' fees and some of the contingent liabilities and so on. So that's why we say it's 23 billion plus. But it's all very well documented and detailed for the first time by a government.
Kamal.
The Petrotrin report, if I'm not mistaken, it was expected to come before Cabinet. Was that today? Can you give us an update?
Yes. The Standing Committee on Energy, which as you know is a sub-cabinet committee, met with respect to the Petrotrin report, the P.S. Lashley-led team. You would recall that we had asked from that Standing Committee on Energy for the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Energy, Petrotrin, NGC, and Mr. Motley to provide their comments on the P.S. Lashley report. All of that was brought together. We then put together a small team to take a look at it to make recommendations to the Standing Committee on Energy, which took place yesterday. We met, we debated, and we put forward our recommendations from the Standing Committee on Energy to Cabinet today. Cabinet has the report as well as the Standing Committee on Energy's recommendations before it and is currently giving it some active consideration.
One of the recommendations on the table, dissecting of Petrotrin into three parts?
At this stage, we can't go any further because, of course, Cabinet has not adopted recommendations as yet. And in fact, I think I can say that the Minister of Energy now is going to go out and have some conversations with various stakeholders, come back to Cabinet to give us that information, and then we will take decisions as to what we will do. So at this stage, it's premature to say anything.
What point may we get a decision on Petrotrin? How long?
Very, very soon. We've given him a 2-week time frame to go out and meet with his stakeholders and come back to us. Cabinet will meet and give it consideration the first week in August. And we expect to make a decision there. Any other questions?
How is the voluntary submission of forms?
I don't mind you to ask that. I came here to talk about... I'm going to let you in tell a little secret. I came here to talk about CL Financial. And I told Minister Young, I'm sure they will ask me how many forms were submitted.
He did.
And he did
laughed at him.
He laughed at me. I actually texted my PS for the number. I don't have it on me. I'll get it in an hour or so. And I'll ensure that you get it, Ms. Tate, okay? So we'll give you an up-to-date number. I'll send all of y'all will get it.
All right. Yeah?
There's a level of angst by public servants following a statement that was made at the conversations with the Prime Minister this week. I think he went into details about the fact that there are 50,000 public servants, 13,000 on contract, and government has been doing what it can to maintain that. And I think public servants and the PSA may have read that to mean that government may not be able to continue doing that for very long. So is there anything you can say to ease the concerns of some of these?
Every month, as Minister of Finance, I do whatever is necessary to make sure public servants are paid their salaries and wages. And that is my primary objective every single month. So I'll just let you know that the Ministry of Finance has as its prime objective the payment of public servant salaries every month.
The Prime Minister, of course, made that statement, and it was in the context of this government is committed to maintaining any difficulties that we face in maintaining the payment on a monthly basis, which is what the Minister of Finance was saying. For Mr. Watson Duke to interpret that and then to go in this kind of fear-mongering mode is very irresponsible, and it is not at all what the Prime Minister was indicating. We are into job preservation. But of course, he was putting it in the context of the difficulties that we face and the unpredictability.
There is an article that's being circulated about Minister Darrell Smith's trip to China. And there's a
circulated where?
I've seen it on social media pages.
There are a lot of things circulated on social media.
And there's a concern that it was paid for by Shanghai Construction Group. Is there anything that you can comment? Are you aware of this?
First of all, I'm not aware of what you're speaking about, an article circulating on social media. And then that Minister Smith's approval to travel to China was a cabinet approval that was done some weeks ago. I can't recall now the precise circumstances, but it may very well have been paid for by the government of China. That's my recollection. Okay. Yes? Thank you all very much, as usual, for your weekly meeting with us. And until next time, thanks.